It was expensive. It was because someone had a patent on it.
I thought it was Japanese.
Japanese had a patent on it, so I don't know how this would be cheaper. Maybe it's a patent just for human consumption.
Yeah.
Could be, and that's how they get around it.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the interactions between drugs and herbs, and there is now a physician's desk reference for that cross compares everything with everything. That's just come out. And Joe and Terry Braden of the People's Pharmacy is one resource for that, but there's another company that's done a similar thing. And so they're also looking at food interactions with all of the different medications, as well as herb and vitamin and supplement and mineral interactions with all the different medications.
What is this reference?
It's like a PDR, but for herbs and supplements.
What's the name of it?
Well, one of them is put out by the People's Pharmacy, Joe and Terry Graedon, Graedon. They just addressed, I'm from Virginia, they just addressed, they're at Duke University, and their books there's got 3 or 4 books out, but that's one of the things they're doing, and they're sort of the leaders in the field of watching the different interactions with things and learn more.
The actual PDR by the PDR company now has a book on herbs and a book on supplements. Are they any good? Yeah,
They're
very
good, they're
informative.
good.
I just got the
Doctors-
supplement one. Huh?
Yeah, she ordered them, they've been out for about 2-3 years now.
But
And yeah, they're very good. It's all there. So I'm saying there is now, finally, only in the past 2 or 3 years, somebody started to look at that. So the information is out.
The interaction between herbs and drugs.
And drugs and minerals and supplements.
And drugs and food.
Everything. They go all the way.
Oh.
They're cross-comparing everything with everything.
You say this is the People's Pharmacy in Virginia,
Well, they're in North Carolina, but their last name is Graedon, Graedon. And they're very, at home they're both on the radio and in the newspaper.
Well, they've written several books.
They've written, I said
They're
they're,
in
yeah,
paperback.
right. So, their
You
books
can
are readily
access-
accessible through any bookstore or website.
You can access some of their data on the web through Health Central.
Right, or The People's Pharmacy, all one word is also.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure if it's The People's Pharmacy or just People's Pharmacy, but it'll get you there if you just put that in a search term, all one word.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to raise a different issue? How are we doing in time here?
I have another question. Did you all hear Andrew Wales' interview on 60 Minutes, where an independent study was debunking the herbs that he was endorsing? Had you talked about that at all? I really
No.
don't know that much more
I
about it,
think
except I
I
saw
saw it,
the
but
60
I saw the
Minutes.
interview.
Yeah, it was very disturbing.
Right.
I think they blindsided him a little bit, the way they presented it, whether it was factual or not, I have no
What was his response? I can't remember.
He just kind of...
No response.
He just sat there, and he just go ahead, say whatever you want to say, I have nothing more to
The
say.
guy who debunked him is an old-timer at Harvard, who I think he was in fact, our speaker tonight had him for a teacher. I don't know. The dinosaur, and he said he is a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And he's like the quackbuster guys who's that guy, Herbert? Victor Herbert.
Victor Herbert.
Yeah, who
it's
believes
long
vitamin C
veteran,
should be 30 milligrams a day or something. So his professor back there is the one they quoted.
Stephen Barrett is another doctor.
Yeah, that's right. He's in that same.
He's been around
category.
forever. If you
They
look at
they believe in the minimum doses, but even Andrew Weil, who's a moderate and is considered controversial in there when he is probably 3 years behind us. In this room, what he is doing today, we were talking about 5 years ago in this room. So he was on, by the way, an hour ago. Larry King was interviewing.
He's been on very...
It's being repeated tonight again, so you can still see him. Larry King is talking to him, and it started with Susan Summers of the breast cancer.
Cancer-fighting properties, 4 chemicals that are what scientists call anti-angionosis factors, substances that literally starve the lifelines of tumors. So now, as a matter of fact, shark cartilage is often used as an example by the quackbusters. They say, wow, you want to hear something preposterous? And I thought this was pretty plausible, what they were saying, too. If you want to hear something really preposterous, take this claim that they're making, that sharks don't get cancer, so we should eat shark cartilage. And, it always seemed to me, that is pretty far out. I mean, you know, that just seemed like that maybe is a good example of quackery, because we all know there is quackery in the world, right? So which claims are fraudulent or, you know, empty?
I think, Phil, you know, about a year ago,
Yeah.
Life Extension came out and their lead article said, we have sold millions of dollars worth of shark cartilage. We are banning it because we are convinced that we have found no curative
Yeah, I think
effects
they-
of
I think
that
they
or
did.
with any of the people that have been taking it,
Right.
which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Right.
But they don't abandon chalk liver oil, which is different.
Well, see, well,
Not the same
see,
thing.
the
They
thing is,
recommend
here-
shark liver
Here they're
oil.
talking about shark cartilage, and the interesting thing is that, you know, about 4 years ago, there was a front page, the cover of Time magazine said, "The cure for cancer."
Shark cartilage.
It was anti-angionosis factors. And what that means is, you know, the tumor grows fast, it's dividing, it's growing faster than the rest of the cells around it. It needs a big blood supply. So it has to grow a very elaborate system of capillaries and small blood vessels to feed itself. Well, if you have certain chemicals are known to inhibit the growth of small blood vessels. One of them, now it turns out, is shark cartilage. In fact, sharks do get cancer, I'm told.
Yeah.
But so that maybe was not a faulty inference. However, this turned out to be a worthwhile thing. And so that just shows us we've got to keep an open mind and, you know, keep looking for the evidence, keep looking for the test. Yeah, Tony.
I think the point Tim made, that until he reached 160 milligrams of CQ10, he got no results. Shark cartilage has to be taken in huge quantities to be effective. Most of the studies that have used it have used like upwards of 10 grams a day, 20 grams a day. Now, if you're taking 2-3 grams,
20, that's a ton.
you're not getting it. So when you look at these studies and the results, you always have to look at the quantitative data. How much was being used? How long was it being used? And if you're not given enough information like that, you cannot make a good value judgment.
Right, you know, a lot of great stuff, promising stuff, has been undermined by testing it at inadequate doses. That's happened again and again.
Or by picking a different study group. For example, lecithin was tested, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, for cholesterol, and it was found to have no effect. When they looked at the group of people they chose, these people had cholesterol levels under 200. And it made very little difference. If they looked at a study group that had 250 to 300, the results would have been very different. So when somebody's doing a study, sometimes they have a preordained conclusion, and it works out that way.
Right.
This is tough stuff for all of us to deal with. It's so complicated.
It's very complicated. It's also complicated by the fact that there's a lot of money at stake. A lot of big companies have interest in how these things turn out, and they're willing to amplify some scientist over here who's got some offbeat, you know, result. And the mainline consensus of people who are actually researching something may be completely different. And that was illustrated by this Bill Moyers show, wasn't it, Bill Moyers?
Yeah, Bill Moyers,
Yeah, on the chemical industry. And you know, you see how the chemical industry puts these things out. You know, better living through chemistry, and this chemical's safe, and that chemical's safe. And then you find out what the actual science is, and you say, this is the smoke, this is the tobacco industry all over again. They're all the same. And they really are. You cannot believe anything that comes out of somebody with a big profit motive or a big deal. But anyway.
Speaker just
Great,
arrived.
how are you, sir?
Hi.
Good. Phil Jackson.
Pleased to meet you, Sylver.
Thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
Okay, we'll carry on for another few minutes and then
yeah.
Okay,
My pleasure.
good. So anyway, about 4 years ago, there was this big study, and it was in all the papers. I don't know if you saw it. This fellow, Falkman, in New York, had gotten these tremendous results. He showed that by using an anti-angionosis factor, anti-angionosis is the genesis of these little blood vessels, genesis. Anti-angionosis is a substance which inhibits the growth of these small blood vessels. So he'd gotten these terrific results, and these tumors had shrunk, and you know, it was big news. And I really think it will be a cure for cancer in the next 5 or 10 years. In fact, then the people invested in it, and they started doing research, and then they got into these problems about they used the wrong dosage and everything. But now it's coming out again that it's working. And I think myself that in 5 years there'll be 2 or 3 solutions to the problem of cancer. And, we're on the threshold of all those things. It's very interesting. But anyway, anybody want to change the subject and raise a new issue? Yeah, Cordell.
A tidbit on fish. Fish are good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So the Patagonia backpacking catalog had a nice piece on farmed salmon. And the way they farm them is they feed them animal byproducts, lots of hormones, and lots of antibiotics. And they turn out gray, so they have to dye them red. And I thought, oh, is that really
You're
true?
not supposed to eat farmed fish.
So I went to Drager's supermarket, and I was talking to the butcher, and I said, well, here's what I heard about salmon. He said, gosh, I've never heard that. In fact, if you look over here, and we looked over there, he said, here's the wild salmon. He said, well, now they are red. Here's the farmed ones. They have gray stripes running through them that are a little different color. Wow. And he said, well, okay, so maybe they were gray. He said they taste very different. And so I thought, well, I guess they're right,
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I learned something, I don't know from Clara or who, but it really worries me, because, the natural fisheries are being exhausted all around the world. And it turns out that where we really get omega-3s, and the reason we find omega-3s in salmon and other cold water fish, is because they eat little animals which, if you go down the food chain, ate plants, marine plants, which had omega-3 in them. That's where they get it. They don't, their bodies don't produce them, they consume it. And you go down, and it turns out there's these little chloroplasts, whatever they are, in marine plants that produce omega-3, and terrestrial plants don't do it. Now, if we eat farm fish and they feed them grains and whatever else they feed them, we're not going to get the omega-3s. I can foresee the whole world having a great epidemic of manic depressive disorder, and everybody going around, completely wild and with erratic behavior because our diet is, deficient in this absolutely essential fat.
They're now saying that fish, if you want to avoid the mercury as well, you have to have Alaska or Australia or New Zealand fish to avoid mercury.
I mean, it's like we almost ought to start our own co-op so we know what we're eating. It gets so complicated.
Well, of course, Steve made a few statements which, kind of surprised me, but he said that...
Steve Fox?
Steve Fox. Yeah, he said that you don't have to worry about mercury if the fish has more selenium. And he said that a couple of times, and I was like, really? I don't know whether any of you guys heard him, noticed it. But my thought was, well, if we take selenium, then does that mean we don't have to worry about the mercury in the fish?
Because that might be, because selenium is required for the enzyme that produces glutathione. If you have glutathione, the body can, and then with alpha-lipoic acid, the body can get rid of the mercury. I don't know. We have to ask him what he's thinking. But mercury is not. You can deal with heavy metals toxicity in your body by increasing your body's production of glutathione and by using alpha-lipoic acid. Yes, sir. What were you going to say? Yeah.
I want to comment about everything you said. But hey,
Go ahead. Take the time.
But talking about the mercury,
Yeah.
it's I've been assured by a doctor that Dave's tuna is deep ocean fish, and it won't have any mercury in it.
So that's maybe the only one, because all the other tuna.
Well, that's a good tip. That's why we buy that.
Sure. Good.
Dave's tuna. Has anybody else heard anything about Dave's tuna?
Yeah.
Is it really
Really good.
a good tuna? Because I've been told to stay away from tuna. In general.
They're in Santa Cruz. Where Dave's is.
Where's Dave's tuna?
Santa Cruz.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the doctor that
Yeah.
spoke for us in the fall, August, and again in October. I forget his name.
Mike Nichols.
Mike
Nichols,
Nichols.
yeah, he was on it.
He had recommended it also.
Okay.
That's Dave's?
Dave's.
Mike was the
Yeah, Whole
cardiologist.
Foods.
They have it at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Whole
Whole
Foods?
Foods has it, yeah.
Okay.
How much mercury do you have to add to get back to normal?
Go ahead, sir. You want to make another comment too?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Just what
Okay.
you were saying about the algae
Yeah.
in the water, that's why spirulina is still listed as, in many places, as one of the valuable things to
Mhm.
eat that algae and
Mhm.
take spirulina. It's kind of less popular than it was 10 or 15 years ago, but it's still a viable product.
Mm-hmm. Now the thing about it though, that if you get the spirulina, it might be making omega-3, but it may not be concentrated enough. You know, I don't know what the percentage of it. I would think that you'd have to eat a bushel of this stuff to get.
And because again, it depends on where it's harvested and how it's harvested.
Yeah. Well, if you get a fish who's eaten, 1,000 of these, which ate 1,000 of those, which ate 1,000 of those, you could get it all concentrated in one place. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating. But okay, anybody else?
How's about seaweed?
Seaweed, I guess, must be good for you. It's like spirulina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, hearing no other adventures to embark on, why don't we bring Mike up here to introduce our speaker? Michael.
Okay. Well, we have Dr. Sylver Quervedo, as our speaker tonight. Since I don't know, he got his medical degree at Harvard while simultaneously earning a Master's of Public Health at Harvard University School of Public Health. His postdoctoral training includes internal medicine and nephrology at Stanford, where he was also an assistant professor. And he joined O'Connor Hospital medical staff in the practice of nephrology and internal medicine. His areas of interest are quality of life and disease reversal in chronic illness, the phenomenology of healing, the intersection of spirituality and medicine, and the comparative study of healing traditions. He's the founding medical director of the Center for Integrated Medicine at O'Connor Hospital in San Jose. And the philosophy of care at the hospital is to treat the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And he's going to tell us more about it. Unfortunately, the slides he brought cannot be done with the overhead projector that they misunderstood. He had to be a slide projector, but we have copies of the slides.
Oh, great.
So we can give them out. Here's the view here, and give out this badge. Back there. I think there's just about enough.
Can you make sure?
Yeah.
We're going to get about. Did you guys do that? Well, actually, they're tinier than I thought. Okay. Maybe we'll all get one.
Here's extra.
Okay. Everybody get one? Here we go.
Oh, you have two here, Lenny.
Yeah, some are doubled up.
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody get one? Oh, good. Okay. These things are like loaves and fishes every time. That's interesting. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
By the way, before you arrived, we were talking about Andrew Weil being on the air and his dinosaur professor, who I believe was one of the professors.
Bud Roman, yeah.
Yes, we wanted to hear more about him because we were trying to find out what it's called. He seemed to, did you see that program?
The 60 Minutes
Yeah,
segment?
he seemed to shut up Andrew Weil, and we were surprised.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
maybe you could tell us about that, Professor.
Yeah. Andy and Bud Roman, the dinosaur professor in that segment on 60 Minutes, was the former, well, I guess two back, editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Bud is actually a nephrologist also. He's a kidney specialist, and he's an expert on acid-base disorders. Was professor of medicine at Harvard, was actually at Penn for a while, and then at Harvard. And then for probably 20 plus years or so was really a medical journal editor and writer, academic. In his later years, after he retired from the New England Journal, Bud has largely been characterized by his grumpiness. He's just not a very happy person. A lot of people think that he's invented a new career of just trying to get Andy Weil, because he wasn't really very much in demand for a
I think
while.
he's the one who turned down Linus Pauling's article.
Was he? What, is that true?
So.
Yeah, he might have been editor when that was
Sounds like it.
proposed. Yeah, and Bud Roman is a very good example of the almost the anti-scientific, anti-intellectual posture that a lot of conventional medicine is taking right now. It's an interesting phenomenon because these are the same people who will sort of pound their medical students to be more rigorous scientifically, more rigorous intellectually. But when it comes to challenging some of the fundamental paradigm elements of the paradigm, they really operate more as if they were members of a different church or something. It's more a religious kind of thing. Bud is not very well informed about, Bud Relman is not very well informed about, certainly about complementary medicine, alternative medicine, but he's really not even very well informed about a lot of the things that he claims to be well informed about. That segment at 6, Bud Relman debated Andy Weil at the University of Arizona where Andy Weil runs a program in integrative medicine about a year and a half ago. And just following that, wrote a long piece in the New Republic on alternative medicine. I don't know if anybody saw that, but Relman, that debate was videotaped, and those people who studied it pretty much say that Andy Weil won sort of hands down. The segment on 60 Minutes I thought was edited very heavily and obviously biased, I thought. I don't know if you guys said that.
Absolutely.
That's what we were saying. We were just saying
They
that.
blindsided him.
Yeah, and they did that thing about the herbs and supplements.
Yeah.
And you know, Andy's been saying for years that there should be more regulation, there should be quality assurance in that industry, etc. And I, you know, I don't know, you know how they do those interviews. So they'll tape you for 2 or 3 hours, and then, you know, so you don't have a lot of control over that situation. Relman, in that segment, his main argument was that there's no proof, there's no evidence. There's, you know, Andy's just sort of a good salesman. That's the line, and that's just absolute nonsense. There is very sound evidence for lots of the things that are done in complementary medicine, and even people in conventional medicine will you know, say that. Relman is really sort of on a personal crusade, and I think, you know, I've known him for years, and I think it's because he really doesn't have anything else to do. He's not. He really is. He really is a dinosaur.
He falls in with Victor Herbert and Barrett. Have you heard of those two?
Yeah.
Steve Barrett.
Yeah.
On the Quackbusters.
The Quackbuster group. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. You know, I've most of my career has been sort of spent, you know, on the conventional side. Although I've been interested in alternative medicine along the way, and actually I first met Andy Weil in Boston in it was 1972. Andy at that time was traveling a lot in South America, so I've sort of had an interest, but you know, in terms of my professional life and work, it's largely been on the conventional side. So when I sort of made this shift about 8 years ago and started to do this more full-time and as a dedicated emphasis, it became very interesting to me to see lots of the people that I knew very well get really sort of irrational when it came to this. It's an interesting phenomenon, I frankly don't understand it except to say that it's kind of a belief system or sort of a prejudice kind of thing. They just can't get outside of the box. I don't, you know, it seemed pretty obvious to me, as I'm sure to you, that there was a lot of editing going on in that segment, but I'll just tell you that that segment was played and replayed a lot at Stanford Medical School. And the consensus there was that Andy looked very bad, which was interesting to me.
That's
also.
what we thought.
Yeah. Did you thought that?
Well, we thought he got cut off because he was also talked about that he had an interest in the vitamin company or something like that.
Right, Mariposa.
My financial interest. But it's interesting you mentioned Stanford now, because they used to be a bastion of conventional. And I went to a talk 2 nights ago. Who's it? Dean Ornish. The auditorium holds 400.
Yeah.
There were 800 people.
Really?
They had to set up TV sets outside the auditorium to get all the people seated there. And somebody put up money for some vegetable hors d'oeuvres that they'd all had. But they had 800 people. So,
yeah.
And he was kicking off this year's program that they have at Stanford.
Yeah, when was that earlier this week? Or?
Tuesday night.
Tuesday night, yeah, I thought it was the week before, so it was just this week. Yeah, you know, those guys, Dean Ornish and Andy, really have shown a lot of courage. I mean, they have really, they've really broken new ground, and you know, there's no question that things are not going to be the same on the conventional side. And for you know, there are a lot of issues, and that's one of the things we wanted to talk about tonight. But there's just no question that people like Arnold Roman, like Bud Roman, are just flat out wrong. You know, did Ornish talk about his studies and the disease reversal stuff, or is
Absolutely,
he on?
Yeah. He's got it so polished now that
They showed the angiograms and all that. And,
he showed the angiograms. He showed a PET scan.
PET scans.
He even showed some of what's going on in prostate cancer.
Right.
It's new.
Since you have changed, what has been the reaction of your peer group to you?
That's a good question. Well, what can I say? It's sort of a spectrum. Some sort of think I sort of, you know, lost it. Like, you know, why aren't I doing a lot more dialysis, you know, or something like that, you know? Some are clearly, I think, envious. I mean, they, you know, like I was talking to a friend of mine who actually is on the UCLA faculty at Cedars-Sinai. And I said, you know, we got to do something about the profession because a lot of the younger ranks they're kind of depressed about this HMO thing. And he said, the younger guys are depressed, the older guys are depressed too. In fact, the only person I know is not depressed is you. and so I think there's something to that. All of us, particularly in these times, are challenged to reinvent our work, the meaning of our lives, particularly as things change and all that. And medicine is in bad shape. I mean, conventional medicine is in the midst of a major crisis, and it's not just a crisis in the structure of funding, in you know, the evolution of information, and in the complexity of the endeavor. It's a crisis also at the heart of medicine, in the spirit of medicine. It's a crisis in purpose. And frankly, no amount of information is going to solve this. This is a paradigm shift. This is frankly a new era. And even what is happening in natural science, the foundation for conventional Western medicine has always been, quote, you know, Western science or natural science. But what is happening in natural science at its farthest reaches is so revolutionary, even by the most conventional scientific observers, so revolutionary that there is no way that we can say that the medicine that we practice now will be seen as anything other than an anachronism, probably in as short as 20 or 25 years from now. We'll look back on what we're doing and we'll say, gosh, that was really pretty crude, you know?
Bloodletting.
In a lot of ways. Yeah, I mean, it'll be seen as bloodletting. Right.
How about the example of Semmelweis? Do you know what year he did it and how long it took him to wash
I think
their hands?
Semmelweis was in the early 1800s, wasn't it?
There was a guy who said to wash your hands before surgery. And
Semmelweis.
they drove him crazy.
His name was Semmelweis.
Semmelweis,
That's
Hungary.
right. Yeah.
Right.
It took 25 years before they would buy. There's the number, 25 years.
Yeah.
Before they would wash their hands in surgery.
In physics,
In maternity.
I had a quote from Max Planck.
Yeah.
He said, scientific opinion changes funeral by funeral.
Right. Great quote. Everybody heard that?
That is
Science advances funeral by funeral, or
What
physics
is the
changes.
paradigm shift that's taking place today from your point of view?
Let me tell you about that.
the slide.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Why don't we do the usual format and give our speaker a chance to make a presentation and then go to questions?
Okay, all right.
Okay, is that all right with you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Sure.
good, let's do that.
Absolutely. And,
Okay.
and you know, I enjoy the interaction. So I'll
Yeah,
tell
it was a great introduction, really.
But let's put some stuff out so we'll have a little foundation.
Question, what is nephrology?
Nephrology. And nephrology is kidney disease.
Oh.
But on the internal medicine side, kidney disease on the surgical side is urology.
Oh.
Urology. So what nephrologists typically do is manage dialysis and renal transplantation and the internal medicine stuff associated with kidney disease. This handout has some of the main points of what I was going to describe to you. The slides actually have some data which really talk a little bit about the emerging phenomenon of complementary medicine use in the United States, and are a summary of Dave Eisenberg's work at Harvard. Now, you know, this group, I'm sure, you know, you people are pretty sophisticated observers, so you've probably been through a lot of this. So I'll just summarize it very, just briefly. It's no secret that Americans certainly, and actually it's happening internationally, how you think of it, but certainly in this country, people are using what has been called alternative medicine in increasingly large numbers. The current figures are anywhere from 45% or so to 65% of people, when faced with a major health challenge, will use alternative medicine, usually simultaneous to conventional medicine, and usually they don't tell their doctors about it. Wayne Jonas, who was head of the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, at that time the Office of Alternative Medicine, in reviewing this data was prompted to say that alternative medicine in the United States is common, something like $14 billion of out-of-pocket expenditures a year. Concealed, the numbers are something like 70 to 80% don't tell their physicians, and their physicians don't ask. So there's not much,
Don't ask them to.
there's not much communication there. So it's common, concealed, and compensated, that people are paying for it out of pocket. In fact, a lot of the recent interest on the part of mainstream institutions is that they see that this is a potential new market, because on the conventional side they're all doing so badly financially right now. And we'll talk a little bit about that, because I've had some experience in working with a very conventional institution, the O'Connor Hospital, who initially thought there was maybe some money out there in this area, only to find that it's not that easy, and basically you shouldn't do this if your heart isn't in it. It's not a money thing. It's just not about money. And in fact, that may be one of the paradigm issues that medicine is facing in a big way. Okay, so a little bit of the data in the beginning of the slides, but the point simply is that this is a growing phenomenon. It's consumer-driven. There's no indication at all that this is gonna peak out or go less. I mean, the trends are all that it's expanding. It's expanding internationally. In Europe, for example, where traditions of naturopathy or natural healing are well held, integrative medicine isn't so revolutionary, and people are doing it in universities, and it's not such a crazy thing. Herbal medicine in Germany, for example, is very, very advanced. But not just there. In other parts of the world, conventional medicine is alternative medicine. What's alternative medicine in other parts of the world are organ transplants and what we call conventional medicine. So the majority of people in the world probably use traditional healing systems of one sort or the other. And to the extent that they're showing improvements in their infant mortality and life expectancy, etc., one has to conclude that there is some efficacy there. So this is not a marginal phenomena, it's not a fringe activity, and it's not something that's going to go away. And for conventional physicians, even people sort of, like myself, that are not sort of wedded to one thing or the other, for us to ignore this, I think, is folly. And I frankly don't understand people like Bud Roman, who say that, we need more data, or there isn't. I mean, there's just no sense in that position. The only reasonable conservative position is that we should, go step by step and evaluate this. But even there, I mean, some things we've already been through it. For example, many of the mind-body techniques, like meditation, for example, have been well studied. There's no harm, and it's absolutely ludicrous to think that they're a fringe activity. I mean, it's silly. So, what's the paradigm? Well, the features of the new medicine are on your handout here. At the top, on the right-hand side, it says features of the new medicine. The first element is a holistic approach. The classical Western medical approach, which uses a reductionistic scientific model and thinks about disease as mechanistic with single causes, is frankly archaic. It just isn't like that. We know from chaos and complexity theory that highly complex systems have multiple sources and types of causality that are operative at the same time. We know as clinicians that if you're faced with a major illness or health challenge, it makes sense to work on the physical, the body. It makes sense to work on the mind, on the family or the context, the community, and also on the spiritual aspect, and to do them all simultaneously. So a holistic approach, I think, will be part of the medicine of the future, and is already part of good medicine. Emphasis on the uniqueness of the individual. In the holistic health community, there is a concept called individual biology, and many of you know this. Chiropractors use it, people that do holistic medicine use it. The idea simply is that even though a given test may be normal, like thyroid function test, for example, is it normal for you? That's the question. In other words, how does your individual physiology relate to the sort of bell-shaped curve and the probabilistic kind of information we get from laboratory tests? That's the sort of holistic physician's point of view. The other way to look at this is that biology, in the conventional sense, is approached as a standard, what we call nomothetic science, a science that seeks to elaborate or elucidate general laws. Like everybody has a heart and it's a pump, and there's a certain volume that's, with each cycle, the so-called stroke volume, and that cardiac output is related to blood pressure, and that's the same for everybody. And when someone's in shock and they're in the ICU, it doesn't matter what their unique characteristics are as an individual. You use dopamine to get the blood pressure up and it works for everybody. Well, the straight answer is there are mechanisms which are sort of universal in biology, and that's true, but they are not all of biology. And as you get to the whole person or the whole organism, you reach very high levels of complexity. And we know that very highly complex systems begin to show qualities or attributes which look unique. It's the old snowflake idea. When you get a very highly complicated system working together, it begins to show features of uniqueness. Now that's how people are. People are not simply, like a real complicated machine. They're much more than that. So this idea of uniqueness of the individual, or biological uniqueness, is now considered to be the central paradox in modern biology. How is it that people can have the same physiology and, quote, be the same, and set against the apparent truth that people are unique, that individuals are unique? Why is that relevant to medicine? Because the response of an individual to an illness or to a given set of therapeutics, to a drug, can be to some degree predicted and to some degree cannot be predicted because of the uniqueness issue. So a medicine of the future will respect, will understand, and emphasize the uniqueness of the individual when it comes to the therapeutic encounter. What we learn from biology will be important to us, and we will continue doing the kind of research which leads to general principles and laws, but when it comes to taking care of individual patients, when people say, I don't think this is working for me, this isn't right for me, we will respect that. That'll be part of the medicine of the future. Any of you who've been involved in cancer care know what I'm talking about. It's really a problem in cancer care because this is just not a principle that operates in conventional oncology. I mean, everybody gets the same chemotherapy regimen. That's what the treatment is, and it simply is inadequate. Now, the third element is the importance of relationship and community. Relationship is a major component of major illness. In other words, relationship in a person's life is heavily impacted by major illness. And in many cases, relationship is a source of illness. And there's a lot to say to this. And it's not just individual or dyadic relationships between two people, it's also community. So what you're doing here tonight, for example, which is a form of community, creating community, is a very healthy thing. It's a very important thing. Conventional medicine and individual physicians have become blind to this. They just don't do this anymore, and they should. It will be an important part of the new medicine. A healing partnership. In the history of medicine in this country and sort of in the modern period, the classical relationship between doctor and patient used to be considered or called paternalistic, and that is that the doctor was sort of the authority. And then it sort of moved to this idea of beneficence, which is where the doctor sort of kind of tries to do the best that he can for you, but sort of basically he knows more, and it was mostly a he. There is every reason to believe that will not be a part of the medicine of the future. People are operating from from an unprecedented access to information through the internet and other sources. It's not unusual for patients to come in with a printout from the NIH website on the latest with what's going on with them. They've been in chat rooms with other patients. They've been in chat rooms with experts. So they're much better informed than really in history. And beyond that, the patients no longer are willing to be passive recipients of a particular prescription. They're partners. When I'm sick, I don't necessarily want somebody just to tell me what to do. I sort of want to participate in a program. Sometimes I want their support, and I'll ask for that. But basically, I don't like the idea of delivering over the control of my life to other people, because in a fundamental sense, that may be an unhealthy act. There is literature, there is data to show that loss of control, or so-called locus of control in psychological literature, is associated with ill health. So in the future, the medicine of the future will be characterized by a real partnership between doctor and patient, between patient and patient. Exactly what you're doing here today.
I would like to make a point. When I have been going to the doctor, and when Lane has been going to the doctor, we have written him a letter, often a 2-page letter, stating what the problems are, what we think some possible solutions are, what has been tried, and what we don't think will work. And the doctor has usually reacted very positively in saying he wished that every other patient came in with that kind of a letter.
Yeah.
It seems to me that what should be done is that if the patient does come in with that kind of a support letter, there'd be some kind of immediate or at least token reward for that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
I don't know, you get 10% off your drugs or something, I don't know.
Right.
The thing is, everyone said it was a good idea, and one thing that it does do for you, when you walk in with that kind of a letter, it usually takes a couple of days to compose that letter. You don't walk out and then discover, gee, I forgot to say that.
Yeah.
I forgot to and so you often get the entire story, especially if I write the letter and she reviews the letter and we get it straight and we get all the numbers and every other thing on there. I think that's part of what you're saying.
Absolutely, and it brings up a point. I think what you're saying is really important. And I don't want to characterize a lot of people who are doing conventional medicine in one way. There are a lot of people practicing medicine that are really great that way. I mean, they really do appreciate this. What I'm just talking about is the context that they're working in is becoming increasingly difficult to do that kind of medicine. And they'll tell you that too. But the good doctors, they love it when patients get involved, when they communicate, when they have questions and that sort of thing. I think good doctors want that. And frankly, any behavior that you want to impact on the part of the patient, in other words, anything that involves the patient's behavior, is much more likely to happen if you're kind of involved in your own thing. If you're calling the shots, you're going to make the changes that are necessary. One of the great failures in conventional modern medicine are the so-called lifestyle diseases. This is cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. And so the conventional medical model for those diseases is an abject failure. I mean, the prevalence rates are increasing, the therapeutics don't work. It's pretty interesting to think about. So I think you're absolutely right. There's actually medical literature where that's been studied. There's a study from UCLA in the early 80s where they went into a gastroenterology clinic. It was called the study of the activated patient. And they sat with people in a waiting room, and they asked them why they were there. A lot of people were there for peptic ulcer disease. And they gave them information while they were in the waiting room, and they said, do you know what questions you're going to ask? Do you know why you're here? And here's some information about ulcer disease. and here's what you should talk with your doctor about. They briefed the patients on the encounter. They did that, and then they studied a group that had none of that. And the group that had the information and were briefed on the encounter had much better outcomes. And it was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. It's in the conventional literature. It's called the activated patient. So it's not rocket science. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, and it's been lost in the current kind of rush. I mean, everything's a time thing these days with this HMO stuff. It's really crazy. So I absolutely agree with you. The next, on the left-hand side of your handout, the next box down in the middle there says features of the new medicine. These are some other elements. The importance of self-care. That will be more and more important. It's going to be less the doctor doing the thing than you doing for yourself and using the doctor very strategically. Self-care is more and more important. And one of the things that's important for physicians is how do we reinvent our work so that we can foster self-care, so that we can work with patients on self-care. One of the ways is that we got to work on ourselves. A lot of physicians lead pretty unhealthy lifestyles, so they can start self-care with themselves. And that really, they don't like to hear that. They don't like that idea. They're kind of like priests or rabbis. They got to wear a thing that they're doing everything right and they're supposed to be that way. It's a very hard shell to penetrate because they carry that around. So when you talk to them about how their marriages are going and whether they're working too much or drinking too much or taking care, they don't like to talk about that. So it's a hard area to get into. I think the best approach to self-care for doctors really is to start practicing it themselves. And I say that from having made my share of mistakes in that arena. Respect for other healing traditions, another feature of the medicine of the future. It's not that other healing traditions are new, it's the other way around. They've been around a lot longer than modern medicine. What's different about them is that when people say medicine nowadays, they don't just mean Western allopathic medicine. People say, well, what kind of medicine? You mean alternative medicine? You mean conventional medicine? You mean traditional Chinese medicine? You mean Ayurvedic medicine? People are asking that kind of question. Now that's a paradigm shift. The thinking 20 years ago was that stuff was kind of old-fashioned, maybe it worked a little here and there for something that wasn't serious. It wasn't taken seriously. It's just not that way anymore. It's just not that way. I mean, people not only take it seriously, but there are lots of case examples of alternative medicine working where conventional medicine failed. There are actually controlled studies in that area too. So it's no longer appropriate or even defensible to dismiss other healing traditions out of hand. It doesn't mean that they won't be studied scientifically. In fact, I think that's going to happen a lot more. They're going to be really looked at rigorously. It's going to raise a lot of paradigm issues, that too, because some of these other traditions are very hard to study from a Western method, from Western methodology. Randomized controlled trials and that. It's hard to do that with some of these other healing traditions. The importance of working with groups, we've already talked about that. The spiritual nature of this work. Robert Thurman, who is a professor of Tibetan studies at Columbia and a long-time friend of the Dalai Lama, made an interesting remark a couple of years ago at a meeting in Washington, D.C. on alternative medicine. He said that every other medicine that's practiced in the world historically has been linked to a spiritual practice. Now, the religion part of it can get sticky. I mean, there's a lot of negatives on that. But there is something to this idea of linking medical work or healing, work in healing with a spiritual practice. I'm not saying so much spiritual belief or dogma, but a practice. And he said that the only one that isn't is Western medicine, modern Western medicine. He said, however, in the future, American medicine will develop its own sort of yoga, its own integral practice where what the practitioner does and how he conducts his life or her life is as important as what they do with other people, with patients. And this idea of the spiritual nature of the work being an integral part of the practice is really very, very profound. And it is something that is the norm. Western medicine being a secular endeavor is really the exception. And that's really only been for the last 400 years or so. So I think that the spiritual nature of healing work will be rediscovered by modern physicians, and I think it's one of the elements of the crisis that is not talked about. You don't hear this much in discussions about financing of medical care. One of the reasons that the conventional ranks are doing so badly is that they're not sure why they're doing what they're doing. They're really not sure about it. There is a crisis in purpose and meaning, and it is essentially a spiritual crisis. Now, this is not so radical. Larry Dossey's written about this. Herb Benson has written about this, and it's out there. What it means for the conventional ranks is still very much, in question. But it will be an element of the medicine of the future. The practitioner that you see, it will be fair to have a discussion with him or with her about what their spiritual practices are and that sort of thing. And what is interesting about this, if you think in terms of some of the kind of most modern notions in physics of non-locality and the importance of distant healing and that sort of thing, there may be something very important about being treated by someone who has, a relatively advanced spiritual practice. There may be. I'm not sure. I think there may be. I had a conversation with a Papago woman, a Native American woman from Arizona, who had diabetes. A lot of the Papagos have it's like 80% have type 2 diabetes. It's really epidemic proportions. And many of them have kidney failure related to diabetes. This patient had kidney failure and also was losing her leg from diabetic vascular disease. She was about 42, relatively young. And I was talking to her about, she was feeling pretty badly and she was pretty down about losing her leg. And I was, at that point, just sort of asking her a little bit about her story and where she was from. She happened to be from a town called Sasabe, which is right on the border, if anybody knows the area south of Tucson, right on the border of Arizona and Tucson, right across from the Papago Reservation. So it's a little town that I actually knew, so I was sort of talking with her about it, and I said, why do you think everybody, has diabetes? And she had these ideas. She said it's because they eat flour tortillas, because if you go into Mexico, everybody eats corn tortillas, and the flour is bad for you. And actually, I think she was kind of right. The white flour is probably not as good as the corn. Anyway, so she was telling me these things, and I said, well, what do you think about some of the traditional healers down there? And she said, well, you got to watch out for those guys. I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, some of the medicine men, they drink too much. And then she said, like, if you get a bad one, you get really sick after they do a ceremony with you. I said, well, so some of them are good and some are bad. She said, absolutely. So, the reason that I say this about the spiritual thing is that it's tricky business, but I think it's important, and I don't know how to assess it, but it's not just people who say that they're, quote, spiritual. It's not enough for me. And it's not just people who sort of wear a window dressing. There's something about authenticity and depth. But to the extent that you can make that connection with someone, it can matter, I think. It's like if you have a minister or a rabbi or someone who you can really connect with, it's different than just going to another person. That, I think, is important. And the reason that it's important for medicine is that I think it can have a healing force or power. In medicine of the future, we will learn more about this. And finally, the last but not least, a relationship to nature. Many of the healing traditions in the world, for example, traditional Chinese medicine, which is well developed in this area, have as a principal element in their philosophy that nature has healing power. And to the extent that we have, in Western science and Western medicine, gotten into this sort of positive, sort of the so-called positivist program in science, you know in order to predict, and you predict in order to control. That's the positivist program. That idea kind of comes from the notion of sort of dominion over nature. Nature, sort of the biblical idea that nature is kind of bad and that we have to control it because it'll get us if we don't, kind of thing. Many other cultures regard nature as having good and bad elements, and that there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it, and we're part of something larger. And rather than control or power, their relationship to nature is more framed in terms of harmony. And this is something that will be an element of the medicine of the future. It's the naturopathic tradition in this country, naturopathy. This is part of that tradition. It's part of traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine. It is not part of Western scientific medicine, and to the extent that the ecologic crisis that we're all involved with evolves, it will not only be relevant to medicine, but to all of us. So we will have to take seriously what Fritjof Capra has called ecoliteracy, understanding our environment.
Would you include seasons in that? We were just talking about the fact that seasons are now being, we don't eat in season anymore because everything comes from around the world. Would you include seasons?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, Mike. The traditional Chinese medicine practitioners that we work with, they really work with seasonal influences, in diet, in what kind of activities you do. That idea of seasonality is really, they think very much that your physiology changes with each season. And if you don't pay attention to it, you can get out of harmony, and that's how you get sick. So yeah, absolutely. I think to the extent that we live in artificial environments, that the environment is more and more impacted by us and is less in its pristine state, all of those things are going to be more and more important. Just chemicals in the environment alone, I mean, the whole thing is just it's enormous proportions. Antibiotic resistance, another big thing, because there's so much antibiotics being used in the cattle industry and raising meats and stuff. So anyway, those are the result of a study group that we did for about 4 years at the hospital on this question. What can we learn from this phenomenon? What are the elements of the new medicine? So I'm going to stop there, maybe pause there. I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening at the hospital. Let me just check in on the time. It's about 8:30. You guys, how long do you?
9:30 at least.
So you got plenty of time.
Yeah,
we have plenty of time.
Usually like leave 15 or 20 minutes for questions and stuff.
Okay. What I can tell you, probably the next most important thing is so we sort of put this together for ourselves. Like, what would we do if we could reinvent medicine? You know, what if we did? What if? And some of the incentive was to get away from what HMOs were sort of pushing everybody to sort of be, quote, more efficient, which is to do more with less time and kind of like practice according to a recipe, an algorithm and all that stuff. So some of the people that were involved in this were just sick of that whole thing. Others, like myself, were more interested in the broader issues, and so we sort of put this together for us as our vision. We decided we didn't want to just do alternative medicine. We called it integrative medicine. And the reason that we did that is that we were not, for two reasons. One is we were not willing to give up our sort of position on the hospital staff and all that. And I still do conventional nephrology. I still do intensive care work. I still consult for the other physicians, et cetera, in nephrology, and also in internal medicine. And some of it is good. I mean, some of it is definitely good. For example, we use a drug called erythropoietin, which is very powerful, very useful. People with chronic kidney failure before erythropoietin had very severe anemias. Their hematocrits were about 20, and they really felt horrible. Erythropoietin was a dramatic improvement. It's a recombinant DNA product. I mean, it was made with recombinant DNA technology. It's a peptide hormone, and it cures the anemia of chronic renal disease. Has very few side effects. It's a great drug. You were talking about Judah Folkman, is that they need to be used in a better way. The context needs to be changed, and they need to be used in conjunction with other things which work in different ways and maybe work just as well, but in a different way. So we called it integrative medicine. So we wanted to take the best of conventional medicine, keep our role in the hospital, but start exploring alternative medicine. We started a study group, a focus group in the hospital, and we proposed to the hospital. Actually, the hospital was interested. They actually asked us to start looking at it, because as I was mentioning to you, they heard that there's this big market thing happening, that there's millions and millions of dollars going into alternative medicine. So they wanted us to do this because they wanted to sell herbs and sell products and this and that. And so, you know, they were interested in from that point of view. We were kind of more interested in the bigger picture. Anyway, suffice it to say that we were able to find a common ground with the hospital. So we started a center at the O'Connor Hospital, which is now called the Center for Integrative Medicine, where we tried to work from that paradigm, from that model. You can just pass those around. Thank you. What we did is we did several things with the hospital, not the least of which is develop a credentialing strategy and all of that, because we proposed to bring in traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, acupuncturists, massage therapists and body workers, holistic nursing. We redefined nursing in holistic terms, mind-body approaches, hypnosis, meditation, guided imagery. We wanted nutritionists who were not hospital dietetics. So one of the most amazing things about hospitals is if the drugs don't get you, the food will.
I have to ask this question about dietitians in hospitals who are reporting to doctors who never took any course in nutrition. How are they able, to do their nutrition if the doctors have never learned it?
It's it's been called a national tragedy, an abomination. I mean, it's an amazing thing. It's the blind leading the blind. I mean, but these people have, master's degrees, and I mean, they, So Pauling actually used to talk about this. Pauling used to say what parades as nutritional science for master's degrees is ridiculous. I mean, it was a farce. I mean, he used to say that the science is poor. That they put out this stuff about RDAs, about recommended dietary allowances. I mean, all this stuff like everybody knew, and people didn't know anything about that stuff. And then they take a 5% of that, slice 5% of that, and that's what they give in medical school. So you have a body of professionals who really don't have a very advanced state of the art, and then they take a piece of that and they put it in medical school and they call that nutrition. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And then the next piece is even more interesting. Most of the people in hospital dietetics department, their training is food services. I mean, they go to it's not gourmet restaurants. It's food services. I mean, they know. In fact, when the early Dean Ornish work, when they were surveying some of the hospitals to try to get the demonstration project going with the Mutual Omaha group, they visited some of these hospitals. And Dean Ornish works with these chefs who are really good chefs. When they went to the hospitals, they were assessing whether they could change the menu. And one of the places that they went to, the chef said, "Well, what kind of stoves do you have?" And they said, "Well, we don't have stoves.
We use microwave.
Everything was microwave, and everything was prepackaged. And what was not, it was either frozen or processed. I mean, that's the mentality that they work from. And yet within that, they still will make these prescriptions for a certain amount of protein, a certain amount. I mean, it's a kind of a amazing thing. So we
white bread, a lot of white bread.
Yeah, I mean, patients know this. I mean, I had this. My grandmother actually was in the hospital, and she said, what is it about the nutritionists? I mean, they don't teach them how to cook. I mean, they know a lot about nutrition, but they don't know how to cook. And it's really, and then if you take some of the modern notions, all the new stuff about phytochemicals and the newer approach to nutrition, plant-based diets and all that, they don't have a clue. So when we first started, the nutrition department was...
In all fairness, Roy Walford is a physician at UCLA. He has a degree in
nutrition,
but he's an exception.
UCLA has a good group, actually. And there are exceptions all around. And there are some very good people too. But I'm talking again about the sort of the broad slice, what's out there, you know, kind of in the average place. It's just not very good. Now, the interesting thing about this is a little bit of experience that we've had with the hospital. When we first started, nutrition was really nervous about us. They thought that we were just going to be, you know, like some of these, we were going to do these really extreme diets and, you know, macrobiotics. And I mean, they just didn't know. You know, they were really nervous about it. It's about 2 months ago, we did the doctor's lunch. Our center did the doctor's lunch. Because the doctors were they were complaining so much about the food that the nutrition department was getting a lot of heat from the hospital administration to do something. So we said, well, listen, we'll do the lunch for you. We'll do sort of a vegetarian thing, and it'll be good. And, you know, we have a really good chef. We have a nutritionist and a chef both in our place. So we did it, and the doctors were really turned on. They were really excited about it. They enjoyed the food. They wanted to talk about the healthy diet stuff. And the other thing that was interesting was the nutrition services director was really happy about it because she got a lot of points and looked good and all of that. So, you know, in the short space of it's only been about 2 years, they've moved from being like really afraid of us to saying, hey, this is great, we want to do this, you know, we want to do some of this newer diet stuff that you're talking about. So it didn't take very long. They do have a lot of constraints in terms of the budget and what they have a lot of their suppliers. The quality of the food is just not very good. You know, that's they don't really do fresh foods and whole food. They're not there yet. But anyway, we have some ideas. Yeah.
I was talking to a hospital dietitian once and about the food they were preparing, and they use a service that prepared food for the airlines.
Right.
And she also pointed out that they had great quality control, that all their meals were predictable and the same to half of a maraschino cherry, is the way she characterized it.
Yeah, that's exactly the mentality. And, you know, I suppose there's something good about that in the sense that their budgets are predictable or something, but it's the
More
same.
than that, they can't, if they have very good control, they can't be sued that easily.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, it's kind of an efficiency and a sort of management thing. And that's an interesting thing, you know, the whole thing about food. You know, there's a very interesting study in the cardiovascular literature that compared how people ate lunch in Italy, France, and the United States. And it's an amazing study. One of the things that they looked at is how much time people spent eating lunch. Well, Italy was the longest. It was something like 2 hours was the average time for lunch. Yeah. France was pretty close. It was like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. But the most amazing thing about the study is the average time in the United States. 15 minutes. I thought it was going to be like 15 minutes. It was like 8 minutes.
At the desk.
Yeah, I mean, people are they're having lunch as, you know, as they're moving through the room. It's 8 minutes or something like that. So this question about, you know, food and all of that, I mean, it gets you into this sort of larger issue. You know, it's not only the quality of the food, but it's the community, the time. You know, the people there's reason to believe that when you eat together in a group, it's a healthier thing. There's less obesity with people who eat in groups than there are when people eat alone. It's an interesting thing. They tend to eat less when there's social interaction because they're talking.
Fighting over the food.
It's like the worst thing is watching TV and you know, then you don't even know what you're eating. So anyway, the idea that some of these approaches have become the culture of conventional medicine, like the food service industry model, is one of the problems that we're facing. You know, you get people who are sick, and then you know you give them a diet that's not a healing. It doesn't help. It just doesn't make sense. You know. Anyway, so we got some nutritionists and a chef. We also have two psychologists, one who does biofeedback and the other who is a chaplain, who is in charge of the spirituality and medicine program. And we started doing very conscious work in groups. We started working with groups, and we sort of had to learn how to present to groups and talk with groups and work with groups a little bit better. The psychiatrists obviously this is part of their stock and trade, so we had to learn from them. We're doing a project with type 2 diabetes now where we're taking a group of people through an entire year program the goal of which is to reverse diabetes, lose weight, achieve ideal body weight, achieve behavior changes, normalize blood sugar, and actually that is on a study protocol. It's actually a research study with Stanford where we're looking to see whether we can actually stabilize or reverse the renal disease that goes with type 2 diabetes using a holistic approach in a longitudinal group model. A little bit about what we do. It's the very last thing on the second, or it's on the top on the right on the second
regarding
page.
the meals, did those meals ever get to any of the patients?
The meals that we just did?
Yeah.
No, not yet. not yet. But they already asked, the doctors have already asked us to start doing their meals, and I think it will be only a matter of, I mean, you know, patients say this every day.
What is the cost factor like? Can you do it at a similar cost price?
Than the hospital? You know, when we put together the center, we designed it completely different than a hospital. And one of the things we learned about hospitals is that a lot of what they do is very expensive, and the quality is not necessarily there. For example, I bet that if you looked at unit costs in the cafeteria, it wouldn't be that inexpensive. They have a very high regulatory burden with licensure and stuff like that. It's really expensive real estate because of that. One of the things that we did when we outfitted the center, we got furniture from like places that outfitted homes and that. I mean, we designed it like a home. We didn't use the hospital suppliers, and when we compared costs, they gave us a really small budget. And our place looks a lot better than any place in the hospital. And part of the reason is we don't buy chairs from the hospital suppliers and stuff, which are very expensive. So they're, in terms of real costs, it probably is more expensive to do what we're doing, but in terms of what they do, there's so much, it's just, I don't know that it's artificial cost, really.
Is it sort of like buying a
It's like military.
It's more like
military or aircraft?
Toilets.
Seated in the aircraft has got to be 50 times more expensive than it really is.
It's that kind of thing, yeah. It's just very difficult to...
So the aircraft quality chairs in the cafeteria that really are just the same. By the way, that's how it is in the aircraft industry. I found out that the starter motors that they use in the aircraft are just car starter motors.
Is that right?
Yeah, they run them through. However, the aircraft factory buys them from the car or the same manufacturing. It says, yeah, that's the right one, and sends them on. They put them in the aircraft.
Right.
At 10 times the cost.
At 10 times the price. Huh?
Right, yeah. The physicians, in terms of the model, the physicians on the staff are all part of the hospital staff. We had to do that for a lot of reasons. One of which is we had to sort of make peace with the medical staff to do this, and we had to sort of carry them through this. And the people who started the program all were established members of the medical staff. We had a number of alternative medicine physicians in the community who wanted to participate with us, but who had not been part of the medical staff. And that became a difficult issue for us. We wanted to work with them, but since we were part of the hospital, we had to go through a hospital appointment, and that requires a certain, you have to have a credentials verification, you have to have the boards are checked and all of that stuff. So it was limiting in one sense. On the other hand, it forced us to go slow, and some of the alternative medicine doctors didn't like that. So they couldn't really join our staff because they weren't willing to go through the medical staff appointment process. So all the doctors are part of the medical staff. It's a holistic approach. The physicians work as team leaders. We work in groups. We tend to review cases as a group. And we work with the other practitioners, the acupuncturists, the body workers, nutritionists, the people that do hypnosis, etc. And the experiment is to do what we're calling integrative medicine, to see whether we can put this all together. And frankly, that has been very difficult. That has been the hardest thing. That's a real challenge. When we talk to the acupuncturists, for example, they talk a completely different language than we do. They just have a different model of illness. We now have a physician who is interested in Ayurvedic medicine, has done some training with Deepak Chopra and also with the Transcendental Meditation Group, and an Ayurvedic medicine practitioner who's very well established in the community. But this is another example of a whole system of the different doshas and the way that they view health and illness. So what we're saying now when we present this in national meetings and that is that we need to go back to the basic phenomenology of healing. We need to go back to the basics and explore and investigate what the phenomenon of healing is about. And then we need to construct a new language to begin to talk to each other. It's easiest among those people who are cross-trained, sort of cross-dressers, from TCM, from traditional Chinese medicine, who are also MDs. Dave Eisenberg calls them cultural ambassadors. It's really great if you have people like that. There just aren't that many of them who know the alternative medicine modalities but are also trained in Western medicine. In the future, I think you're going to see more and more of this. I think you're going to see collaborations between the various groups, and it'll be, I think, very interesting.
Do you deal at all with what used to be called the laying on of hands?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where is that in your
Well, it's
experience?
it's in the
Like, do you have
little
any Reiki?
little bullet there that's
Oh,
called
you have
psych.
Reiki clinic.
We have a Reiki clinic, yeah.
The Reiki clinic?
Yeah, we do.
And why have you chosen Reiki rather than Healing Touch?
Well, we did have Healing Touch too for a while. It depends a little bit on availability, on who is available to us and whether they want to work in the context that we're working. We did have a Healing Touch group, and they actually were a group of nurses who decided to go in private practice as their own group. They actually rented space after they were with us for a while. And I don't know if that's going to work for them. I heard that they want to come back. I don't know if it'll work for them. But one of the frustrations they had is that they don't like the medical model. They think it's limiting.
They don't like what?
The medical model. The idea that the hospital can be, the hospital is sort of a mixed blessing. I mean, there's good things about being associated with a hospital, and then there's a lot of baggage there. So the people that we've worked with from the who are doing the alternative therapies have had to face that issue: how much they want to work in an integrated setting, and how much they want to contend with the medical mainstream, and some more than others.
Can you get any funding from Washington, Jim Gordon's group?
We've had contact with Jim Gordon. Actually, we're meeting with him in May, and we'll be discussing some of that. There's discussions about model clinics and stuff like that.
Who's the group?
Jim Gordon's group. That's the White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine.
How do you work out the actual integration of dealing with patient problems in a group setting? Do you have staffing, multi-modality staffing?
We do a multidisciplinary.
And do you involve the conventional caregivers in the hospital in that as well, making it really a complementary sort of a model? How do you work out the
process? Nomenclature that's used is case management. It is a multidisciplinary group. Now, we've done it in our center, which is an outpatient setting. We're now working with the hospital to bring the complementary therapies into the inpatient setting for the first time. And there are a lot of ways that we're doing that, a lot of reasons, but basically it's a big shift for the medical staff. They asked us to do this. They asked us to bring acupuncture, massage therapy, and hypnosis, meditation, and imagery into the hospital. So we're working with them on a credentialing strategy. Actually, we're starting that now.
Aren't they Catholic hospital?
Catholic hospital.
How they're allowing all this non-Catholic stuff?
Well, the Catholic hospital thing is interesting. That's a whole other story. First of all, they pride themselves in being a values-driven organization, so we can sort of talk mission and values. Second thing is the spiritual thing they like. Now, it's sort of post-Vatican II, it's ecumenism. They're okay with, religious pluralism. That we wondered about that. I mean, in fact, we had discussions about, there were a number of the staff wanted to have an altar and a sacred space in the clinic, and we discussed a lot about how we would do that, which icons would be permissible and which not. So we started out with only flowers, but we had actually we've done some really creative things, I have to say. We decided that the sacred space was for the patients, and then the nuns, they just had to relax because the patients are all different. I mean, they can't do the Catholic thing in the ICU, for example. When we have Buddhists and Islamic patients, Catholics, Jewish, they can't do that. It's only for the nuns and the hospital that they can kind of push the Catholic thing a little bit. So actually, they have been pretty good about it. Now, we have one big problem, and that is that the Catholics I tell them this, so it's not anything that I don't say in public. The Catholics have this relatively archaic view of women's health. They are in the Middle Ages on women's health. And so they get really kind of nervous about that area. We don't do gynecology in that. I mean, that's sort of done in other places, but they don't even really want to have too much discussion there. Now, the interesting thing about it is that the nuns, the sisters who own the hospital, they're actually a relatively progressive group of people. And I've often wondered about that. They're really open. They love alternative medicine. They really push back the money people. I mean, they really are into serving the community, serving the poor. They're really there, the nuns. And I've often wondered about that, and I think the reason is that it's a patriarchal system. So the priests are the ones that have all the power, so the nuns have been kind of on the fringes all these years, and so when they get a chance, they just go for it, So they've been very supportive.
It's also the Catholic mysticism tradition.
Right.
It's very strong.
Yeah.
And so when you really understand Catholicism and Reiki in the idea of God's healing love coming through your hands,
Right.
I mean, that is everything that Catholicism has always been based on.
The deepest traditions of Catholicism are wonderful, absolutely. And I also believe one other thing. I think that the feminine emergence, it embodies that. And that's why I think the nuns are powerful. Now, some of the nuns, they used to get a lot of flack about 10 years ago because, these places were having trouble financially and all that, and they were getting flack from the business people. Well, they went away, they got MBAs, and now they're back on the board. So they're doing this thing, and it's a very interesting experience for me because, I sort of my culture. I was raised Catholic and all of that, but being in a university setting for years and years, I sort of became quite secular in my views, and it's very interesting to be associated with an institution where there's there are professed spiritual values. Like for example, we did a healing. We did an actual healing at Christmas, where we had people in our music. We have a music and healing group where there were prayers and chanting and some music, a choir. And the prayers were, they were ecumenical. I mean, we had Celtic prayers, Catholic prayers, Buddhist prayers. And then we transmitted that over the closed-circuit TV of the hospital. And we had patients come in for the healing. And what we wanted was to show the other patients that this kind of healing work was going on in the hospital. And it was a very powerful experience for everybody. Very well received. And most of the closed-circuit TV they use, they put stuff on there that's pretty, uninteresting. So it's a very interesting tradition to tap into. And one of the great contributions, I think, of alternative medicine is an awareness of the spiritual dimension. Absolutely.
Two questions. Who's the employer of the staff people in the center, and how do people access the services of the center?
The model, the center is owned and operated by the hospital right now, and the hospital gave us 2 staff positions, modest staff. The rest of the staff are all private practitioners, so they're not employees of the hospital. They have contractual relationship to the center, and they have to be credentialed. They have to apply for a position, their credentials are reviewed, presented in committee in the hospital, and they're appointed. They're given privileges to work at the Center for Integrative Medicine, just like you would for a hospital, but they're not employees of the hospital. The patients gain access 2 ways, largely by self-referral or referral from their caregiver, physician or other. And for my practice, it's a large percentage, probably more than 50% are referrals from physicians, because I'm sort of in that, community. But a lot of patients are self-referred. They come to us just on their own.
What insurance plans can you accept?
The insurance thing has been a whole story. We started out, and I have to tell you the whole story. It's kind of common. We started out basically taking all the insurances. And then we got into lots of problems with prior authorization issues and all of that. So then we said, well, let's give the patients a claim form, a super bill, and have them submit to the insurances. Well, the hospital contracts office said, no, we have managed care plans and we have contracts. You have to accept the insurances. You can't do a super bill kind of thing. So we did that. We stayed with the insurances for about 1.5 years and collected very little. Most of it was loss. It was basically a loss operation on that side. The practitioners, at that point, the hospital was billing for the practitioners who were practicing. So the practitioners would submit their fees to the hospital. The hospital would pay the practitioners, and then the hospital would submit the claim to the insurance company. The hospital lost so much money on those claims that they said, we're not going to do this anymore. Now the patients pay the practitioners directly, and the decision to be on insurance plans or not goes with the individual practitioner. We have had a couple of forays by the managed care groups who are in alternative medicine, and one, for example, does a lot of acupuncture stuff, and what they do is they end up they sell a discounted service, is what it is, and they enroll acupuncturists onto their panel, and in exchange for getting less money, you get patients sent to you. So that's how it works. Well, our acupuncturists are pretty busy. They were getting full fees out of pocket. They didn't really want to work with the discounted plans. What we've heard from people in the community is that it turns out to be kind of a volume thing. You make $40 or $25 for an acupuncture treatment instead of $50 or $80. So what some acupuncturists do is they'll run 4 rooms to make it up on volume, and that's one thing that we really haven't wanted to get into that. We've done a real quality thing, and in terms of the patient satisfaction in our experience, it's been very good. In terms of the money, we're not making a lot of money.
How about Medicare?
I take Medicare. I take Medicare because I'm a Medicare provider and I have dialysis patients and transplant patients. Once you're on the Medicare program, you can't not do it. You're either on or off. So I do. Medicare pays like $15 for massage. It doesn't pay very much for some of the other. So that's a big problem. Absolutely a big problem. In fact, well, there's a whole story there.
Are you going to give case histories?
Yeah, I was going to. You sure? Nobody's getting too tired.
No, not at all. I don't think anybody's getting tired. This is terrific. But I have a question too.
Yeah.
Well,
Can we did on it?
I don't know.
Well,
Go ahead, Don. Go ahead. You go.
I mean, I won't talk so much.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You first.
Okay. I had a question.
Yeah.
I've been fascinated with the idea of the type of medicine that's done in Brazil, and the use of the herbal things, and they're getting tremendous results. Have you thought of bringing up a Brazilian person to explore what they're doing? Apparently it works well. They have a lot of money. They pay. People are healthy, and different regime of how they handle it. Could you talk about that for a minute?
It's a great question. We have a partnership with the Foundation for Mind Being Research, and Stanley Krippner was just up talking about some of the healing that's going on in Brazil. The 4th Friday night of each month, we do a combined meeting in kind of frontier science with the Foundation for Mind Being Research at our center. So, there'll be some interesting things coming up if you want to check that out.
Is that open to the public?
It's open to the public, yeah. It's a small fee. I think it's a $7 fee for a foundation or something like that.
What is it again, the time?
It's 8 o'clock.
That's right.
8 o'clock the 4th Friday evening of each month at our center. And let's see that on. I didn't bring any FMB. I have some.
A map. There's a map on the back of it here.
Yeah, I have some foundation brochures in the car. I don't have them here, but for example, this is April. The 25th or the 4th Friday of this month, there's a discussion by Dean Brown and a couple of other people on complexity theory, chaos theory. In May 25th or something around there, the 4th Friday, Bill Gray, who's a homeopathic physician in town, who's actually quite accomplished, is speaking on sort of the newer ideas on information medicine and information storage in water as a mechanism of action for homeopathy. He's speaking at our center. So the point you were asking, we're those areas which we couldn't get, the medical staff to, were too far out for the medical staff and credentialing and that. What we've done is we've created what we call study groups. Like we have one in music and healing. We're starting one in intuitive healing or spiritual healing, laying on of hands. Jane Catra is going to be part of that, who's a very accomplished spiritual healer. We're interested in many of these sort of frontier areas. The straight answer, I'm interested in shamanic healing, in shamanism and indigenous healing. So the straight answer is we're interested, and that's how we do it. We tend to have a study group, and we'll put on a program or a workshop. We can't do it with individual in the clinic part because that's part of the Joint Commission review of hospitals and all of that stuff.
So I've got two questions. One is, give us a little bit of the inside view, politically, what goes on at a hospital. You take a disease, PMS.
Yeah.
It's a junk disease treated by quacks, and then this is say this is Kaiser.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a story. About a year later on the radio, we're the experts. We treat PMS. You can trust us. Come to Kaiser. And I'm thinking, now, what happened in that hospital? Could you get? And then I've got another question.
Yeah, that's happening in Kaiser.
What happened?
Yeah, it happened.
It happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's happening in all of the hospitals. Well, let me tell you my take on that. Okay, my view. First of all, this is a consumer-driven movement. The wisdom of this movement is not coming from the profession and is not coming from hospital administrators. And I think that these institutions are changing because they're being forced to change. When I meet in the inner sort of sectors of the hospital board and that, there are great people. I mean, I don't want to be unfair to them. And some of them are more visionary than others. But the institutional inertia that's there, that sort of trundling along that they just keep doing, it's going in the wrong direction. No question about it. So this is coming from you all. This is a push. And the reason that the institutions are responding to it is because the voices...
Money.
Well, it's money and people are voting with their feet. I mean, if they're not getting what they want, they're hearing about it. But there's another element, and actually Benson has written about this too. The morale on the conventional side is getting so bad that people are saying, there's got to be some better way, and so even to those people on the inside, it's just such an unhappy situation. So what happens in the hospital? Practically, somebody, a number of things, somebody who's part of the inner circle, like the hospital administrator, gets sick, and they go to a conventional doctor and they have a miserable experience, or they get one of these junk diagnoses like chronic fatigue syndrome or something, and they don't have any place to go. I mean, they're not even labeled. I mean, they're labeled and all that stuff. Or one of their kids gets sick, or something like that. One of the things that happened when we first started out is that a number of physicians referred family members to me, and they didn't really want anybody to know about it, but they, and it's in a sense these are sophisticated consumers. They know there's more out there, and they also know that what conventional approaches have to offer, and in a lot of cases they're not very good. So that happens, and sometimes those people are on boards or on medical staffs. These places get into a crisis financially or in terms of their public perception, and so they're forced to contemplate change when before they weren't. A third thing that happens is that somebody becomes a champion. Somebody's willing to draw the line and say, enough, I'm not going to do it that way anymore, this is what I believe in. That happens. And then sometimes there's money, but frankly, the money thing, these places have a real highly developed ability to waste money. I mean, they just don't know how to make money. And it's even when people give money, it doesn't necessarily change the institution. It's really a big problem.
I heard Stanford's $80 million in debt.
Stanford is in the worse shape than ever. I mean, there's talk about selling Stanford Hospital for the first time in history. You know, CHW, the Catholic Healthcare West, of which O'Connor Hospital is one part of, is a consortium of 60 hospitals. From 1982 to 1996, this was a big success story. This is one of the reasons that we started. We started in about 96, the study group. CHW made a lot of money. They created a consortium of all these individual Catholic hospitals, and they put them together, and there was a really sort of rapid growth. And it was a classic example of too rapid growth with inadequate infrastructure development and management. In 1996, they started losing money, and between 1996 and 2000, this last year, they lost $900 million in 4 years. I mean, that's an incredible accomplishment. Even by modern corporate standards, that is an accomplishment. I mean, most people, they wouldn't just fire him. I mean, they would, like, you know, hang him or something. I mean, that is an incredible waste. $900 million.
How can they lose money when they charge you $4 for an aspirin? I mean, the prices are just,
you know, my wife,
beyond comprehension.
My wife had to get a mammogram and some other, you know, a node biopsy and stuff last year. I mean, the whole thing cost about $7,000. I mean, it was really a lot. She had excellent care. I mean, really good people, good doctors, you know, and everybody treated us really well. It was at O'Connor Hospital. The billing is absolutely indecipherable. I pay the bill, they send me the check back, then they send me a bill, and then you know. It's an amazing. People have, you know, in health policy circles, people have, you know, wondered about this. What is wrong with healthcare? Why can't it be managed? You know, it's just an incredible mess. One reason that people say is the complexity is much higher than other things. I'm not sure that's the whole story. I think there are paradigm issues, structural issues.
Well, you know, if you're in the hospital, there's one nurse for like 50 rooms.
Yeah, well,
so
now,
it can't be because there's too many people.
No, it's not that. And that, by the way, is not the way it used to be, and it's really bad. I mean, nursing is in terrible straits. I mean, really.
How much is the system driven by the current legal system, where malpractice suits?
That's a big.
You know, like breast implants for years was draining tens of millions of dollars and turns out to be totally unfounded. And there are many cases like that.
Yeah, no, the legal thing is definitely a problem. There's a tradition in the United States. In Europe, for example, if you're you know, a conventionally trained physician and you're well established in your professional circle, it's quite normal for physicians to experiment in their practices and to try novel approaches. And I mean, it's a tradition that kind of goes back to the earlier sort of non-institutional period when, you know, doctors really, you know, encountered a lot of things for which there wasn't good treatment, and they tried things, you know. But in the United States, that's like there's a cultural taboo against that. It's a sort of the so-called standard of care, community, which is sort of kind of doing what everybody else does, even though it doesn't work. I mean, it's that kind of.
Are you up against that?
You absolutely in this country. You absolutely are. It's hard to venture out into this and not be labeled and all. That's why I say, like, people like Dean Ornish and Andy Weil have shown a lot of courage. I mean, you know, people say all kinds of things about him. They used to make fun of Dean Ornish when he was first at UC, that he was teaching. You know, he was meditating instead of, you know, being in the cath lab and stuff like that. That is really a problem with American medicine. It has not fostered the kind of creativity that it should, and I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of the folks in conventional medicine are kind of depressed. You know, they're just not very happy.
You know, one of the things I think that's important about the new medicine, the people who, like yourself, who are trying to find the best and give their patients the best care, is that it's necessary to say, these well-established medical practices are too high risk. I wouldn't recommend them. These drugs are too dangerous. I don't believe in them. And to make judgments like that where you actually challenge the standard of care. Now, what I don't understand is, you know, I don't know how things work in the hospital. I mean, apparently doctors have some independence because they can avoid those therapies if they choose to do so, right? Without getting sued, usually. But it seems to me that one of the biggest problems you would have is that you'd have to confront a lot of these really dangerous bad medical practices that have been foisted on the medical community, for example, by pharmaceutical companies who are misrepresenting their products. And how do you do that without stepping on so many institutional toes that they don't let you hang around?
You hit the nail on the head. It happens. It happens, and it's a combination of diplomacy, of grace, of kind of a warrior medicine. You got to be able to draw the line. I think it would be hard to do if you're not well established. One of the debates that we have, Frank, we had this afternoon. One of the debates that we have, a good portion of our staff thinks we should dump the hospital. We have this, like, why don't we just be independent, right? And the other part of the staff says, well, look, we don't want to become another marginalized activity. One of the problems with alternative medicine is it needs to come into the mainstream now, because it's time. It's time. It's come of age and that sort of thing. And the institutions, this is where you find patients, this is where a lot of people come. We have introduced a lot of patients to alternative medicine who would not have tried it if it hadn't been for us, because we're in a situation that they can consider relatively safe. We've guided others in the use of alternative therapies. There's a role there, but frankly, to be honest with you, I'm not sure what's right. I don't know. I had a meeting with the hospital administrators yesterday, and they started out by saying, okay, we have decided that integrative medicine is the medicine of the future. I said, and they said, but it's not going to happen for 5 years. So we got 5 years of uphill battle, and and they've been listening to me hammer them for the last 2 years. So we got to figure out how we're going to get through the next 5 years, and we're not making any money, we're losing money, and on and on and on. And then they the whole meeting becomes sort of characterized by the really very dysfunctional way that they operate with each other. I mean, it's really it's a very sick culture. Hospitals are administrators. Anybody here work in a hospital? I say this, as a compassionate part of that system. I mean, I'm saying this to my friends. This is a community of people who work very hard. I mean, they work really hard, and they have trained. I mean, their whole lives are given to this. I mean, this is a vocation, but who are really burned out, who are really facing a very difficult challenge in that their social status, lots of things have sort of not what they used to be. But more important than that, they have internalized a culture that would be called in traditional circles, or Native American circles, or shamanic healing, they would be called wounded healers. They are not wearing their wounds with pride. They're going like this, and when you're sick, you don't want to be with somebody who's like that, because they're pretty sick too, and you want somebody who's got some strength, some spirit. You want a little bit of that, and if they have wounds, if they know what it's like to be really hurting, you want them to be able to say that with some pride, with some dignity, because it means that they've healed. And you don't find that in hospitals right now. People are hurting, and the administrators are hurting, and it's just a very sick culture. So, we get into this debate about is the hospital a liability or an asset? I mean, should we dump them or not? And I really don't know the answer. I mean, I can say from my own personal journey, my expertise is with hospitals and institutions. I haven't been out of that system a lot, so I can do something maybe there that I couldn't do in other places. But I don't know if it's right. Sometimes I think maybe I'm better off.
What I think you should do? I mean, this is off the wall. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, because I think what you should do is go to the nuns and say, look, we don't want to be marginalized. We know we've got a hold of some really important stuff that makes a lot of sense. People respond to it. We want to set up our own hospital. We want to set up a new kind of hospital, a new paradigm. We want to do everything our own way. We want you to fund us, and then go out there and this would be the easiest thing in the world to market, because everybody is sick and tired of established medicine.
I got to stay in touch with you. That's a great idea. Andy Wild's been saying that. Andy's been saying there's going to be a new institution that is going to have elements of the old sanitarium notion, what's done in Europe, relationship to nature, the dividing lines between acute and convalescent care are going to be more blurred. People are going to be able to go in and stay for a while. And
How
come
about
out.
house calls? That's cheap.
Yeah.
You say the person doesn't have to go to the hospital, so they don't need a building.
Yeah, and some
Anybody
things,
who's in business, if they can go to your house rather than you go to your place of business, then you don't have to have a space rent.
you know, there's a medical group, there's a group of physicians in San Diego who set up their whole practice as a house call practice.
Yeah.
And actually, they're doing very well.
See, I'm old enough to remember that.
Yeah.
When I got chicken pox, the doctor came to our house.
House calls are a great thing. I did them a lot when I was younger, and I think they're a very valuable thing. But this idea, you know, we actually talked with the hospital, St. Louis Hospital down toward Morgan Hill, you know, was kind of in trouble.
The hospital.
Yeah, they were selling it. And we actually talked to them about this idea, and actually Jim Gerber with Western Athletic, some of the folks around there were definitely venture people interested in the idea.
It will work.
They're more in the spa.
How about
fitness
Washington for
area.
money to do that?
You know, it's such a there are a lot of issues to do a whole institution, and I'm not sure that you would get there sort of as a jump. You might have to go more incremental, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. Penny Ranch and
the insurance companies just don't. My wife's recovering from cancer, and she uses used a combination, and the insurance companies pay for the chemotherapy, but they will not pay for any of the
for the other
supporting
stuff. Right.
So you got to pay for that yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't afford it.
Right.
I mean, they just don't have the money.
Right.
As an example, my wife had just a gallbladder problem, right? But it was a long drawn out thing because, you know, first of all, identifying the problem, and she couldn't eat for a month or so. Finally went in, tried to kind of get by without getting treated. It was too bad. Finally went in for an operation, and she hadn't really eaten well for already like, you know, almost 2 months, you know, has an operation, and then it's got complications. She's under for 3 hours, blah, blah. So but at the same time, you know, I go to Dr. Carl Ebnather, and he's one of the people that are on the board here, and one of our very interested in you know, alternative, integrative medicine. And so I wanted to kind of bring him in and kind of have him help out where possible. Like I thought, well, wouldn't it be good to have vitamin C in the drip, for instance, or something like that? Right? Do you think I could like get anywhere at all? Like I couldn't get, you know, he wasn't allowed in the hospital, it seemed, anyway. And as far,
they won't let him in.
They wouldn't let him in, and he couldn't make me a drip that he could make at home because the problem was, you know, after I took it, right, then it was a liability issue for my doctor.
Right.
So I couldn't do anything about it. You know, I just couldn't get any. No one. It was like a brick wall there. It was like.
Yeah, it's like that. It's a very difficult problem. I mean, you know.
And so, you know, to support what you're saying, you know, I'm very interested in this. In fact, you know, I sort of have it as one of my programs. In fact, you're one of the reasons why I'm here. Not that I do come every time as much as possible, but I'm pretty interested because I'm predicting that I'm going to have to go in for an operation at some point. You know, I don't necessarily know what it is, but I'd like to find myself a hospital that is integrative, so that I can have some of the things that I think work, like maybe after I've had the operation or during the operation, depending on what everyone thinks is a safe thing. I have some nutrients coming in. Like when my wife came out of the operation, it looked to me like she was highly toxic from the anesthetics and everything. You know, it seemed like detoxify would be a good program.
Absolutely.
So I think there could be a fair amount of interest.
There's a hospital. It's a small hospital on the Big Island in Hawaii. Have you heard about this? Earl Bakken, the person that started Medtronics, the pacemaker company, made a lot of money. Earl Bakken. He's an engineer. Anyway, he
Bakken, how do you spell it?
Yeah, I think it's Backen or BAA, something like that. Anyway, he retired in Kona, sort of wanted to retire in Kona, and there was a small hospital in Hawaii on the Big Island that was actually facing bankruptcy. I think it was about a 30, 40 bed hospital, small. And they asked Earl Bakken to get on the board. Well, Earl Bakken's very interested in alternative medicine. Actually gave $1 million to Harvard, to Dave Eisenberg's group, to do infrastructure development for the center. Anyway, the entire hospital was reinvented as an integrated medicine hospital. It's the first in the country. It's in Hawaii. And the whole thing it was redesigned, and the state of Hawaii matched, I mean, they actually gave them a lot of money. One of the reasons that integrative medicine sells so well is it's the one form of medicine which takes traditional healing seriously and integrates it. And in Hawaii, the traditional healing community is very important. So this is a very interesting experiment that's going on. It's only been going for about a year and a half, even less, about a year. I was just in Kauai at a meeting with people from this hospital in November, and they're just starting. And I've heard that they're having some of the same problems that we're having in terms of how to do this integrative thing. But the commitment is there. The medical staff is open to the whole thing. The principles of practice, the vision has been crafted and all that. So it's a very interesting thing, and I think it's going to happen in other places.
So I was even thinking of like, I was thinking, I got to go down to the board or something like these hospitals and try and get them to somehow accept some. I don't know whether I'd have any chance of getting anywhere with that. I'd like to go talk to these people and say, hey, I'll sign everything you want me to sign to say I'm responsible and all that. I just want the medical doctors to work with my primary care physician, so that he can do some things.
Yeah.
And work together with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Wells' group in Tucson is doing a protocol on high-dose vitamin C, intravenous vitamin C associated with surgery.
Really?
Yeah, they're doing a formal study. You had a second part to your question, and I want to give you these cases.
Is there a local organization for complementary or alternative physicians to get together to form their strategies for dealing with hospitals and all of that? And if there isn't, shouldn't you form one?
Well, yeah, there's ACAM, which is
College for the Advancement of Medicine.
Right.
They have about 2,000 or more members.
But they're Bay Area.
They meet twice a year in different cities.
But that's national. Yeah, in terms of the local groups, there was a group of holistic physicians who were doing a lot of chelation therapy in their offices, formed a group called the Society for Integrative Medicine about 6 years ago, and it kind of went a little bit and then didn't go. As a lot of these things are, there's the American Holistic Medical Association, which is actually growing now and is actually pretty strong. They have local chapters. There's actually a group called the Society for Orthomolecular Medicine.
Yeah.
Is the old Paul group.
Cunion is the president.
Right.
He spoke here twice.
Right. They're more North Bay, San Francisco,
Right.
but they're a very interesting group. Lester Packer, some of the people from Berkeley, really very powerful, great scientists, really very innovative. And we're now in the process of forming what we're calling the consortium, the Bay Area Consortium for Integrative Medicine, which is a collaboration between ourselves, the Stanford Center for Complementary Medicine, the California Pacific Medical Center. CPMC has a program in integrative medicine that's part of the Institute of Health and Healing, and UC San Francisco has a group called the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine. Bernard Osher gave them a lot of money to start a program there. So we're forming a consortium of the 4 centers to try to create a Bay Area activity in integrative medicine that is, ours is going to be institutionally focused. It's not so much individual practice or private practice.
But will that effectively block out the individual practitioners?
No, I don't think so. What we're hoping to do is create a relationship between the institutions that's sort of lateral, that gets away from, CPMC is owned by Sutter, and UC and Stanford don't like each other right now, and we're trying to get away from that and create, an activity which allows us to advance the vision of integrative medicine. But within that, we will have activities where individual physicians, et cetera, will be invited. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know how that'll go, because there are a lot of issues. That was one of the things that was on the agenda with the hospital administrators yesterday. They want to do some fundraising, to do infrastructure development, to design a model, financial and business as well as medical, that kind of works with integrative medicine. And so it's a little bit more institutional agenda than some of the private practice people who are some of them are very happy to have purely private activities. Some of them are very much involved in products development. You know, they do, you know, herbs and supplements, that kind of thing. So there are different agendas. But, and that's one of the things that I think is going to, it's not going to go away. You know, I gave testimony before Jim Gordon's group, the White House Commission, in December. And they were asking about how do we, you know, how do we do integration? What's integrative medicine sort of going to look like? And what I told them is that integrative medicine, integration is inevitable. It's going to happen, but it's not something that can be mandated. It's a cultural process, and it's not something that we can say there's a specific approach that's right for everybody. In fact, one of the things that we have to rediscover in healthcare is a kind of pluralism. We have to open it up, and the arbiters, the people that will decide whether this effort is successful, are not going to be doctors or traditional Chinese medicine physicians or naturopathic physicians. It will be patients. It will be the public.
But just the way you're thinking of it, the way you phrased it, is that we will form this group. Us institutions will. Oh yes, and we'll have individual doctors. We will invite them to something.
Right.
You know, that's like a club.
Right.
I mean, you're institutionalized. You're setting up another institution, right?
It creates a space.
So how do you make that an open society?
I think
an open community.
I think you can. I think you can in terms of you can structure activities where it is open and defined by participation. Now there's a problem when you get into individual practices because of the institutional credentialing requirements. For example, you can't walk into a hospital and just say I'm a doctor and I want to do this in your place. You have to go through a credentialing process. And if you're credentialed at one place, it doesn't mean you're going to be credentialed at another place. You can't get on the hospital staff at Stanford unless you have, you know, academic credentials. But you can get on another hospital. So there's not strict reciprocity in terms of credentialing. So we have to create a space where we can construct activities where there's not that barrier. And largely that means activities that are research, educational, public, that area, like what we're doing here. When you get into
open rounds.
Right. When you get into individual practices, then you have credentialing, and you also have liability issues that can vary.
Don't forget the case histories.
Okay. You guys still up for it?
Yeah. We just have one more visit.
Early for next week.
Oh, okay.
I gotta go.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't need.
Thank you. You know, these are, what I'm going to do, these aren't put together, there's 2 pages. So send them out together and take one of each. And that way,
One of the.
so you want them to
It feels really. How can I help you? I thought you were going to help me pass.
Oh, I got one.
You go that. Tell you what, here, mine.
they're kind of circulating. Yeah, you can, they're circulating around. I got one right there.
Oh, that was I used.
To move on pretty quickly here, so maybe we could just have maybe another 10 minutes and then we'll
talk
about
now. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Let me wrap this up. Yeah, sure. For you. Those of you that have the case history, it's kind of a lot of detail, and some of it's sort of medical jargon and terminology. We can get into it after the details if you want to, but let me summarize this for you by pointing out some of the main elements. This was a 46-year-old woman who was referred to us. She was actually referred to us by her gastroenterologist. And she was a patient who really was not a refugee from conventional medicine. She loved her doctor. She had a gastroenterologist who was very good, by the way. She had an internist, and she had a psychotherapist, a psychologist, who she saw actively and who she liked very much, but who all of whom were unable to make any progress with her. And her gastroenterologist, Al Hurwitz, referred her to me, to us at the center, sort of with a question, you know, like, I don't know where to go with this. Is there anything that you guys can do? She had intractable chest pain and vomiting due to esophageal spasm. She had one of these syndromes. It's called nutcracker esophagus or diffuse esophageal spasm that is really bad, and which, you know, she was vomiting every day. And it started in 1997 when she got sort of a flu syndrome and had some antibiotics prescribed. She had really bad chest pain that was due to reflux of stomach acid. She had an upper GI series which was normal. She had an endoscopy, upper endoscopy where they stick a tube down, looking for a disease called Barrett's esophagus, and she had a biopsy which was negative. She had another upper GI. She was sent to a surgeon to consider what's called fundoplication, where they sort of tack the diaphragm up against the esophagus to prevent reflux of acid. It's kind of a big deal. The surgeon decided that it wouldn't help and suggested that she have further studies of esophageal motility. She had a CAT scan of the abdomen and pelvis, which was normal. She was sent to the Mayo Clinic, where she had studies using a nuclear medicine technique to see whether her stomach emptied normally, trying to figure out what to do for her. She was given a diagnosis called rumination syndrome, which is kind of an anxiety syndrome associated with a lot of heartburn and reflux. And she was recommended to start biofeedback and didn't have any improvement with that, did it? In 1998, some 8 months or so after this started, she was a fairly accomplished administrator, had a staff of I think 20 or 30 people at least, ran fairly large budget, worked for FMC, large corporation,